Questions without notice. I give the call to the honourable member for Wannon.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. The Daily Telegraph has this morning reported the Albanese government granted a visa to Fayez al-Hassani, an individual proudly and openly linked to Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, both listed terrorist organisations in this country, and that al-Hassani is now living in Australia. Prime Minister, has the visa for this individual been cancelled?
Call to the Leader of the House.
Mr Speaker, the process for all of these visas for people who've come from Palestine has been exactly the same for every one of them, and the engagement, they all come into the same process, and the engagement with the security agencies has been the same the whole way through. And I have to say, if it's a choice between who I'll take advice from, between the Shadow Minister who asked the question or the Director-General of ASIO, I'm sorry, but I'm going to listen to the Director-General of ASIO.
Order. 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 The Leader will pause. Members on my right are going to cease interjecting. The member for Spence is now warned. So I can hear from the point of order on the member for Wannon.
Its relevance, Speaker. The question was a very direct one. Has the visa of this individual been cancelled?
Order. I can appreciate the member would like order. The member for Wannon will not interject. The member for Gippsland is not helping things. The minister was asked a question. He needs to remain directly relevant. He has been talking about ASIO. I'm going to listen carefully to make sure he is being directly relevant.
So the process that goes through is this. Every single applicant is first of all checked against the Movement Alert List. The Movement Alert List is updated every 24 hours involving ASIO's information. Then, if additional flags are raised at any point, separate referrals happen to ASIO. Then, for people who were getting out of that part of the world, they had to go through a border that was controlled by both Egypt and Israel, with the relevant checks that would happen at that point as well. In addition to that, it is now public that there was a further check that was made in March of every single visa holder within this caseload, either onshore or offshore. All of those checks have been made. If at any point our security agencies gave advice to the government that a visa should be cancelled, then the government, of course, would take seriously that advice. But the concept that we should abandon our security agencies and defer instead to Google searches from the opposition is not something this government will do.
Order. The Deputy Leader of the Opposition will cease interjecting, because I'd like to hear from the member for Chisholm.
Thank you so much, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Communications. How will keeping the national broadband network in public ownership deliver productivity, connectivity and cost of living benefits for Australians? And what are alternative positions on NBN ownership?
Give the call to the Minister for Communications.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for her question. Mr Speaker, Labor founded the National Broadband Network to provide fast, reliable and affordable broadband to all Australians. And we are delivering on that vision for a world-class fibre network. And only by keeping the NBN in public ownership can that vision continue to be delivered. Mr Speaker, the NBN is critical infrastructure that reaches over 12.4 million premises across Australia. Currently, more than 8.6 million homes and businesses are connected to the NBN. Ongoing government ownership of the NBN will help keep wholesale broadband prices more affordable for consumers than if the company was in private ownership. Now, the Albanese government is investing $2.4 billion over 4 years to give more households and businesses full fibre access. More than 70,000 kilometres of new fibre has been rolled out, and over 2,300 fixed wireless towers have been upgraded. Mr Speaker, for the first time, this work is progressing on time and on budget. Fibre speeds can deliver speeds 18 times faster than the average copper connection and is less likely to drop out. And from next year, Mr Speaker, the NBN will be boosting download speeds by up to 5 times current speeds at no extra wholesale cost. Mr Speaker, the productivity and efficiency gains are significant. Research commissioned by NBN shows that Australians save more than 100 hours and $2,580 per year in avoided travel time and costs in working from home and undertaking tasks online. And, Mr Speaker, we know the Coalition wants to sell the NBN just like they sold Telstra. In fact, the former minister declared in 2020 the NBN was built and fully operational. Mission accomplished, he declared, despite the fact that there were still millions of Australians in the fixed-line footprint stranded on deteriorating Coalition copper. They took the first step in the NBN sale process. And this was a legacy of their ill-founded copper experiment. It blew out the cost of the NBN from $29 billion to $41 billion, then $49 billion, then $57 billion. And we know the Liberals have formed, selling off assets and leaving ordinary Australians with higher prices and poorer services, and the Nationals too weak to stand up to them.
Order. There was far too much noise while that the member for Hume. There was far too much noise while that minister was on her feet. That wall of noise is completely disrespectful. For everyone on the front bench, member for Barker, member for O'Connor, just completely yelling is unparliamentary, but it's also disrespectful, particularly when a female minister is on her feet. Order. No. Order. Order. The member for Barker will leave the chamber under 94A. I mean it. The member for Barker will come back and apologise to the House.
I apologise. I apologise.
Members on my right will cease interjecting. We'll hear from the member for Wannon.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. The Albanese government granted a visa to Fayez al-Hassani, an individually openly linked to terrorist organisations Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. In 2019, al-Hassani reportedly hosted a summit of terror organisation leaders, which he opened by stating they must, quote, I quote, confront the occupation by all possible means. Prime Minister, has the visa of this individual been cancelled?
Call to the Leader of the House.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. The question's not different to the last one, and the answer's not different to the last one either. If at any point we receive advice from our security agencies that a visa should be cancelled, that is what will happen. That is what will happen. But this concept that shadow ministers should be the proxies for our security agencies is just a bizarre way to operate. Our security agencies work through the evidence that they have. They never stop collecting information, even after people are here. They never stop collecting information, and this government stands with full confidence in our security agencies. I'm not sure what the position of the opposition is on that.
Talk to the honourable member for Bennelong.
My question is to the Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government ensuring Australians have access to affordable broadband now and into the future? Are there any threats to a publicly owned and affordable NBN?
Talk to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Bennelong for his question. And indeed, the NBN was built by Australians for Australians, and it belongs to Australians. and it belongs in public hands, Mr Speaker, because it should be affordable and accessible to all Australians. Now, we've introduced legislation into the House today that safeguards the future of the NBN, making sure it can't be privatised, sold off or hollowed out, because there's never been a public service or asset that the Liberal Party didn't want to carve up and sell off. That is what they do. And they had this to say when they vehemently opposed the creation of the NBN. Of course, Malcolm Turnbull was then the Shadow Minister for broadband. I used to say the Shadow Minister for broadband and the copper economy, as I called him at the time. And he said there is probably no Gillard government policy more inexcusably or needlessly reckless than the construction of the National Broadband Network. And we know as well, that Tony Abbott, the former Prime Minister, is one of the key advisers of the current Leader of the Opposition. He had this to say: it's pretty obvious that the main usage for the NBN is going to be internet-based television, video entertainment and gaming. What a limited vision. Do we really want to invest $50 billion worth of hard-earned taxpayers' money in what is essentially a video entertainment system? They didn't get it. They didn't get the role that the NBN plays in education services delivery for every child and every student, the role that it plays in the delivery of health services, the role that it plays in agriculture, the critical role that it plays in our national security system as well. They spent a decade trying to destroy the NBN. They introduced 60,000 kilometres of copper to roll out an inferior network, replacing fibre with copper that was redundant before it was even finished. And the cost blew out from $29 billion to $57 billion, out of date before it was operational. And, Mr Speaker, they show their opposition to this through their reaction. They show their hatred of a system that they opposed from the beginning, that they undermined when they were in government, and that they don't understand as well that this is a part of creating equity for every Australian.
Before I call the honourable member for the next question, I'd like to do some acknowledgements. I'm pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today is the Honourable Greg Piper MP, Speaker of the New South Wales Legislative Assembly, and Ms Helen Minikin, the Clerk of the Legislative Assembly. I'm also pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today is the Honourable Peter Gutwein, the former Premier of Tasmania. Mr Gutwein arrived in Canberra today after walking 330 kilometres to raise awareness of the importance of multicultural Australia, with the Walker symbol that, when it comes to diversity and inclusion, every step forward together makes us better. And also in the gallery today are representatives from Headspace, who are in Parliament House today to celebrate Headspace Day 2024, to remind young people and their families that they are not alone, and also members from the Work Exposure in Government, or WEX program. They are in Canberra visiting departments and agencies to learn about careers in the Australian public service. Welcome to you all. And on indulgence, the Prime Minister.
Speaker, on indulgence, this morning I had the privilege of meeting with the former Premier of Tasmania, Peter Gutwein. He's on a mission, walking to celebrate the role that migrants have played in Australians' story up to now, but also in Australia's future. And Mr Gutwein has, through his experience and concern that he had in Tasmania, wanted to reaffirm the important role of multiculturalism in this country, in who we are in 2024. He spoke to me today about the extraordinary contribution that people, particularly from the subcontinent, are making in the delivery of health services in Tasmania, but we spoke about the range of services and the role that migrants are playing essentially in agriculture, in the great story that is modern Australia. And I certainly reaffirm my government's commitment to social inclusion, commitment to support for multiculturalism and for cohesion as well. It's one of the reasons why I've appointed Peter Khalil as the Special Envoy on Social Inclusion, because we can't take it for granted. And I congratulate Mr Gutwein on his leadership in undertaking this big journey. And his journey, his walk, is similar to the walk that Australia has taken towards this modern, vibrant, dynamic, multicultural society that we are. We can't take it for granted. We need to cherish it and we need to nurture it. And I thank Mr Gutwein for his contribution post-parliamentary life, his ongoing contribution to public life. Well done.
And on indulgence, the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker. Well, I join the Prime Minister and endorse his fine words and welcome Peter Gutwein to the Parliament, and I look forward to catching up with him later today. As the Prime Minister points out, it's an incredibly important objective he has in his heart, and the way in which he's been able to embrace people from across Australian communities, from Tasmania to Canberra, is a great credit to him. The message that he spreads and that he seeks to be adopted by all Australians is one that is incredibly important for the fabric of our country today and into the future as well. And Peter, thank you so much for the sacrifice, for the awareness that you create, and we welcome you as a most honoured guest here today.
The call to the honourable member for Curtin.
This is a question for the Minister for Home Affairs. To respond to the housing crisis, we need more construction workers and tradies to build more homes. But the building industry recruited only half of the additional workers it needed in the first half of this year. The government has proposed a fast-track specialist skills pathway for skilled migrants. Given this housing crisis, why have you specifically excluded construction workers?
Give the call to the Leader of the House.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Speaker, and I thank the member for Curtin for the question. In terms of the different priorities that we have in managing the migration program, the principle should always be that our migration program, particularly the skills stream, needs to be tailored to the needs of the nation. And there is a very clear need of the nation at the moment with respect to the building of houses. I'm alarmed when I hear some of the comments that come from those opposite, where they seem to be willing to cut the numbers, including cutting numbers of people who would in fact be involved in building houses, as somehow trying to help deal with a challenge in having enough houses. But now the legislation that's before the Parliament creates a number of different priority pathways. There is one that will largely be used in particular by IT workers, where there's a threshold of over 135,000, the specialist skills pathway, that trades are not part of, and that's the one that the member for Curtin refers to. The core skills pathway, though, does include trades if they are listed on the core skills occupation list, and I'll be making decisions on the core skills occupation list soon. The draft list that was put out, which I can refer to because that was put out as draft list and is public, did include the various occupations: electricians, carpenters and joiners, plumbers, roof tilers. Making sure that we have enough people to be able to build homes is a critical role of the immigration system. And the member for Curtin is right when the member for Curtin says we haven't been able to get the number of people who industry want to be able to get at the moment. That's true. It's also true that last year the number of skilled construction workers who were granted visas was 10,000, and that was the highest number in a decade. So in terms of the government trying to turn the system around to respond to the crisis in making sure that we've got enough workers in construction, that is being done. I do have, and I've had both the member for Curtin raise with me and other members of the crossbench as well raise with me this exact issue, that for all the skills priority, there is a big public interest right now in making sure that we do get people we need to build the houses that we need, and the government agrees with that, and the core skills pathway should be able to deliver that.
Here from the member for Swan.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. How is the Albanese Labor government securing the future of the national broadband network as a driver of a stronger economy? How does this compare to other approaches?
Order. Members on my left. The question was heard in silence. I'd like the same respect shown to the Treasurer. The Treasurer has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. The member for Swan is an engineer from WA. She knows her stuff and she's a terrific local member, and I appreciate her question. Because the national broadband network is a key piece of economic infrastructure. It drives opportunity for Australians and prosperity for businesses and local communities. And that's why it needs to be publicly owned so it's affordable for all. Because high-speed and affordable broadband transforms every part of our economy. It enables revolutions in e-commerce, telehealth, education and training, remote collaboration and government services. Now, the Liberals should understand this, but they don't. It also has vast potential connecting our regions, which suffered under the glacial Howard-era internet speeds for too long. And the Nationals should understand this, but they don't. Now, the Coalition's NBN, Mr Speaker, was half as good for twice the cost. Their waste and mismanagement saw the NBN blow out by $29 billion. And here I want to pay tribute to the Communications Minister for her hard work getting the NBN back on track with the support of this Prime Minister and his government. In our first budget, we invested $2.4 billion in the NBN to give 1.5 million more homes and businesses access to the full fibre network, including over 660,000 in regional communities. And one of the things we're really proud of, Mr Speaker, is we're reducing the digital divide through our school student broadband initiative, which helps up to 30,000 families who didn't have internet access get free broadband, saving them $1,000 a year when they really need it. Now, because of all of our efforts, more than 10 million premises will have access to fast, full fibre by the end of next year. Now, this is how we help make our economy more productive and more dynamic. It's how we make our people and businesses and communities beneficiaries, not victims, of all of the churn and change we see in our economy. Not by making them work longer for less, but by investing in technology and human capital, adapting and adopting that technology. Now, this is not optional. This is essential. This investment is not optional, it's essential. And that side, Mr Speaker, has never understood this. They've never understood the NBN and what it means for our economy. They squandered billions of dollars and they made a total mess of its management, and we are turning it around. This Albanese government and this minister and her colleagues, we are making sure that the NBN is publicly owned and affordable for all, because this helps make our communities and our economy stronger as a consequence.
Give the call to the honourable member for Barara.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Have any of the tourist visas granted to those coming from the terrorist-controlled Gaza war zone since October 7, 2023 been cancelled?
Order. Give the call to the Leader of the House.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I'll deal with the question in two parts. First, specifically with reference to the issue of visa cancellations, but secondly, with the concept of visas coming from war zones. First of all, with respect to cancellations, the situation is the same as when I last advised the Parliament, which is that some cancellations have occurred and they have all occurred offshore. But that does not change the fact that the security agencies never stop collecting information, as has happened no matter who is in government. And we continue to conduct various checks on people who have visas, whether they are onshore or offshore. But specific to the question, the cancellations so far have been offshore. On the issue which is raised in the preface to the question, that's been raised a number of times in this House, is about the use of visitor visas for people coming from war zones. And because when the Syrians who came on humanitarian visas were separately interviewed, there's been a presumption that they were the only people who came from the war zone during that time. It's to be remembered that during the period those opposite were in office, and for a large part of that the Leader of the Opposition, the Minister in charge of these programs. Afghanistan, large parts of it controlled by the Taliban. Did they put a ban on visitor visas from Afghanistan? No. 1,991 visitor visas granted from Afghanistan during that period. From Iraq, during the period, from Iraq and Syria during the period that Islamic State controlled large parts of Iraq and Syria, did they put a ban on visitor visas from the region? No. 4,994 visitor visas from Iraq, 1,505 visitor visas from Syria. And similarly, during the entire period where the Gaza Strip was controlled by Hamas, 864 visitor visas from the Palestinian territories.
Will pause. Has completed his answer. Give the call to the honourable member for Bendigo.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government. How will keeping public ownership of the national broadband network benefit regional Australians, and what are the threats to this?
Give the call to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government.
Thanks very much, Speaker. And can I thank the member for Bendigo for the question. She and I, as proud regional members of this place, know how important the NBN is for our regions. In fact, when we were in government, we deliberately started the rollout of fibre to the home in the regions. Tasmania, all of the regional areas of Tasmania, Ballarat started first, Bendigo as well, regional Australia benefiting, and it was a game changer and remains a game changer for our regions. New businesses started in our communities. We saw people for the first time being able to access the internet and speeds that allowed them to actually be able to study online. It was a game changer for the regions, and it remains so today. The National Broadband Network is a critical piece of infrastructure, and it is absolutely vital to ensuring that communities remain connected, our kids can learn, and our businesses in regional Australia can continue to deliver and sell their goods and services to the rest of the world. We know that high-speed broadband is essential to modern life and allows Australians to work remotely, run their businesses more productively and to enjoy leisure with their families. That is why Labor has delivered the NBN, and it is Labor that is committed to ensuring that it remains in public hands, and that is important for affordability for the NBN, particularly in our regions. Because if we want to make sure it remains affordable and accessible to all, having it in public hands is the only way to ensure that. Right now, more than 8.6 million homes and businesses are connected to the NBN, including many in our regions. It's a great equaliser, ensuring those living in our regions have the same access to affordable, high-speed broadband that those living in our cities often take for granted. The bill introduced today by the Minister for Communications will make this commitment law, removes existing legislative conditions which would allow for the privatisation of the NBN, keeping it in public hands. We know, frankly, if the coalition had its way, the NBN would be privatised, putting at risk affordable, high-speed broadband for families and businesses in regional Australia. And those opposite have form when it comes to this privatisation.
The Minister will pause.
When in government,
Minister will pause. The Manager of Opposition Business gets a lot of latitude because of the position he holds, but just simply yelling non-stop while the minister's on her feet is unparliamentary, and I'll say again is disrespectful. So just to assist the House, so I can hear the answer, so all members can hear, we're just going to cease the interjections from the Manager of Opposition Business for the remainder of this answer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Of course, when in government, they rushed to declare the NBN was complete so that they could flog it off. They supported significant price rises across the NBN products to fatten it up income streams in preparation for sale. And I was here when you privatised Telstra, and I remember we had Kay Hull here just yesterday. I remember arguing with her in the corridors there, saying, why on earth did the National Party vote for the privatisation of Telstra? And we know what that has meant for trying to get services into the regions and what that has meant in terms of affordable pricing of telecommunications. You have form on privatisation. You've sold the regions out when it came to Telstra, and you'll do it again.
Just remind the Minister to direct her remarks through the chair and not to use the term you. Call to the honourable member for Wannon.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, does supporting Hamas pass the character test for an Australian visa?
Call to the Leader of the House.
The questions with respect to character and the different flags that are put forward by ASIO have been answered by Mike Burgess. They've been answered clearly. I'm not going to change a word of what has been said with respect to that.
Member for Latrobe. The member for Latrobe and the Minister for Infrastructure will cease interjecting. So we can hear from the member for Paterson.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Regional Development, Local Government and Territories. Why is ongoing public ownership of the NBN important for our regions, and what other approaches are there, Minister?
Give a call to the Minister for Regional Development, Local Government and Territories.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I want to thank the member for Paterson for the question, because she knows the value of affordable, high-speed access to NBN in our regions. Regional communities just like mine and just like hers rely on the NBN to access healthcare, to access education, for our businesses and to remain connected to each other. It was a Labor government that established the NBN because there was a digital transformation happening across the world and we didn't want Australians to be left behind. In this term of government, we've invested $2.4 billion to expand full fibre NBN access to 1.5 million homes across the nation, and that includes 660,000 across our regions. And we're building on that investment through the bill introduced today, which will ensure that the NBN is owned by those across Australia. We know in 2024 connectivity is not a nice-to-have, it's an absolute necessity, particularly for those people in our regions, and that is why only an Albanese Labor government will ensure the NBN stays in government hands. Keeping it in government hands means we can retain oversight on pricing, on infrastructure investment and on service quality for all consumers. I know firsthand as a regional small business owner that reliable and affordable broadband impacts our bottom line. Without reliable connectivity to high-speed broadband, our business stops. We lose control of invoicing, of inventory, of payroll and of remote staff access. And, Mr Speaker, let me tell you, when the wreckers opposite came to power in 2013 and started ripping fibre out of the ground, they created a digital divide. And that is not an analogy. It is literally a real-world example that happened 15 minutes over the border in my electorate in Jerrabomberra, where half the suburb had access to full fibre, first-rate, high-speed internet, while the other half had to suffer through the ridiculous coalition copper dropout system for over a decade. It took a Labor government to provide high-speed connectivity to the rest of the suburb. And earlier this term, the Minister for Communications and I stood with the Jerrabomberra community to celebrate their final full connection to fibre broadband. Those opposite go into our regions making promises on what they'll deliver, but what they've delivered is a privatised Telstra, a second-rate NBN, which has left our regions behind. Like they sold Telstra, they'll sell the NBN, and if they were given half a chance, they'd sell your grandma's couch, except they'd have to do the work of lifting it, so that might be a bit too hard. Mr Speaker, Labor governments build things. We created the NBN, we created Medicare and we created the NDIS, and we'll keep it in government hands.
Hear from the member for Wannon.
My question is to the Prime Minister. The Albanese government granted a visa to Fayez al-Hassani, an individually openly linked to a listed terrorist organisation, Hamas, and to a listed terrorist organisation, Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Can the Prime Minister guarantee his government has not granted visas to any other individuals from the terrorist-controlled Gaza war zone who have links to listed terrorist organisations?
Call to the Leader of the House.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. There are 7 or 8 different ways of asking the same question, and so I guess we get the same answer again. which is to say that our security agencies never stop collecting information. Never stop collecting information. That's exactly as it should be. And when people first apply for a visa, the movement alert list represents the information that we already have. The different alerts that then can result in an ASIO referral.
Member for Wannan's the leader's completed his answer. Order. 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 When the House comes to order, we'll hear from the member for Lyons.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to support students and build a better and fairer education system?
Call to the Minister for Education.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and can I thank my friend, the legendary member for Lyons, for his question. Mr Speaker, we're wiping $3 billion of student debt for more than 3 million Australians, and the legislation to do that is in the House right now and will be debated this afternoon. The big hike in student debt that happened last year hit a lot of Australians hard, in particular a lot of young Australians. They made their voice heard, and we have heard it. That's why I asked the University Accord team to look at this last year. They recommended that we change the current system and set indexation of student debt at either inflation or wages, whatever is the lowest. The legislation that's in the House does that, and it goes further than that. It backdates this to June last year, and that means that it will wipe out what happened last year and make sure that it never happens again. And this will happen once the bill is passed by this parliament. After that happens, the ATO will automatically apply this to your student loan. It means for someone with a student debt of, say, $26,000, their debt will be cut by about $1,200. For someone with a HECS debt of, say, $45,000, their debt will be cut by about $2,000. It's an important reform to make HECS fairer. It's just one of the things that we're doing to make our education system better and fairer. We're also introducing for the first time paid prac for teaching and nursing and midwifery and social work students to provide them with a bit of cost of living support while they do the practical part of their degree. We're also massively expanding those free university-ready courses that help young Australians get the skills they need to take on a uni degree. And we're introducing an independent national student ombudsman to give university students a stronger voice when the worst happens and make sure that their universities are accountable. All of this is in the parliament right now too. Also in the parliament is legislation to deliver a 15% pay rise to our early educators, people who do some of the most important work in this country. And tomorrow I will introduce legislation to increase funding for our public schools and to tie that funding to real practical reform to turn around the drop in the number of students finishing high school. For about 10 years, the Liberal Party neglected education. Worse than that, they ripped the guts out of it. This is about fixing that. That's what these reforms are all about.
Before I call the honourable member for Fowler, I'm pleased to invite leaders from the BAPS community from Cranbourne are here as guests of the member for Holt. I give the call to the honourable member for Fowler.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. In my door knocking in the past 6 months, my community of Fowler have told me that they have seen unprecedented increases in their energy bills under your Labor government. What will your government do to reform the electricity market and provide meaningful and real relief for households and businesses who are hurting, instead of offering small temporary handouts, which we all know are short-term solutions?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Fowler for her question, and I note that she would have been door-knocking for the local government elections that were held, and I congratulate her on her election to Fairfield Council in the elections that were held in September.
The member for Moncrieff. The member for Moncrieff does not need to interject while the Prime Minister is congratulating a member. The Prime Minister has the call.
And I indeed was also in her electorate last Friday with my friend Tu Lee there in Cabramatta, walking through, talking to constituents in her electorate. And I must say it was a very warm welcome that I received in that wonderful multicultural community that she represents in this place. The issue of energy relief and the recent figures of course, show a decrease, a drop that has occurred, and also, of course, the member, I think from memory, voted for energy bill relief that we introduced into this chamber of $300. In addition to that, you've had the New South Wales government under the former coalition, unlike this coalition here, actually supported energy bill relief. They also supported the action that we took, unprecedented, to put a cap on gas and coal prices, because we understood that because of those global factors there was a need for intervention. Now that was something that was opposed by those opposites, but supported overwhelmingly by the crossbench in both this House and in the Senate. We'll continue to address cost of living relief, whether it be energy, whether it be the medicine price relief that her constituents would have benefited from, the cheaper childcare that they would have benefited from, the fee-free TAFE that they would have been benefited from as well. And I look forward to visiting the electorate of Fowler regularly over coming months, where no doubt I will talk with her constituents about the needs that they have in that important part of south-west Sydney.
You be called on member for Bean.
Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Cyber Security. How will the Albanese Labor government's cyber security reforms help keep Australians safe?
Give a call to the Leader of the House.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Bean for the question. This afternoon I'll be introducing a package of cyber security legislation, and I want to pay tribute to the member for Housing, who is involved in a whole lot of the development of what will be introduced to the House later today. There are a number of measures in there, but I just want to focus on a few of them. One about smart devices, one about ransomware and one about limited use. With respect to smart devices, one of the things that many of us will have in our own homes as well is a series of devices in our home connected to the internet which, if hacked, provide access into our homes. Some of us will have smart speakers. Some of us, for example, will have robotic vacuum cleaners. Many would have seen the story that was published on ABC Online during the week of one of the robotic vacuum cleaners capable of being hacked and effectively providing a video coverage inside somebody's home. At the moment, we have no way as a government to be able to provide minimum standards that provide consumer protection and also provide protection nationally, really, in terms of cyber security if any of these items are hacked. Sometimes the hacking of one item can actually provide a gateway through to everything else within a household. Some items, for example, are still sold where the default password is the word password, which if somebody doesn't bother to get into it and then change it, creates an obvious problem in terms of the security of everything that might be connected to the internet in that house. So the legislation today will allow the government for the first time to be able to provide minimum standards that will provide that protection that the nation needs in terms of cyber security, but also realistically the same sort of protection delivers for households in terms of their own privacy. For ransomware, there's a couple of ways that ransomware attacks occur. Sometimes it's the theft of information and a threat to publish it and sell it on the dark web. On other occasions, it's where a ransom attack in fact gets hold of a system and locks it down. In either situation, the government's advice is always against the payment of ransomware attacks, but we would now at least have, where people decide that they will pay the ransom, a mandatory reporting process so that the government is better able to monitor and get on top of where those attacks are coming from. And the limited use provisions are about when a business has an attack, making sure that the business is confident that when they provide information to the government that we might seek to help them with the cyber attack, that those businesses don't think the government's then going to use that information for a series of other purposes. The bill, of course, because of its national security nature, will go to the Intelligence Committee. There have been briefings that have happened in advance with the opposition as well, and it's one of those examples of cyber security which is very much in the national interest.
Call to the member for Wannon.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Can the Prime Minister guarantee his government has not granted a visa to any individual from the terrorist-controlled Gaza war zone who has links to a listed terrorist organisation?
Call to the Leader of the House.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I said earlier in terms of terrorist organisations that I didn't want to add to the words of Mike Burgess or vary them. I've got the quote, so I'll read it directly. If you think terrorism is okay, if you think the destruction of the State of Israel is okay, if you think Hamas and what they did on the 7th of October is okay, I can tell you that is not okay, and from an ASIO security assessment point of view, you will not pass muster. That is the test. That is the security test that's provided. Now, the member says what guarantee can be provided. Says what guarantee can be provided. And I'll tell you, the guarantee is the guarantee of our security agencies being responsible and a government that has confidence in them, which I might say is the same guarantee the Leader of the Opposition would have provided with respect to 1,991 people coming from Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. It's the same guarantee.
The Leader will pause. The member for Wannon on a point of order.
Thanks, Speaker. Relevance. How can this individual be here then, given that advice from—
It's a point of relevance, mate. It's not an opportunity to ask an additional question or a reframe of the question. The Leader of the House and continue.
Speaker. So the guarantee that this government gives and the guarantee of confidence in our security agencies is the same guarantee the Leader of the Opposition would have given when he let in, on visitor visas, 4,994 people from Iraq controlled by Islamic State, described by the people who then stood here as a death cult. It is the same guarantee that the Leader of the Opposition would have given when he held my job about people, 1,505 people he let in from Syria on visitor visas. The same guarantee the Leader of the Opposition would have given with respect to 864 people who came here from the Palestinian territories. If you want to be on this side of the chamber and you don't have confidence in our security agencies, say so. Say so. Because this government has confidence in our security agencies, and those opposite are now wanting to demand a whole lot of examples which, tested against their record, they would fail dismally every single time.
Call to the honourable member for Boothby.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is for the Treasurer. How is the Albanese Labor government's responsible economic management repairing the budget and making room for cost of living relief? What are the alternatives?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank you to the member for Boothby for her really important question and for all of her work. And once again, Mr Speaker, we're getting questions on budget repair and cost of living from this side of the House, but not from that side of the House. And that's because we're focused on the economy and they're not. And it's because since the last time the Parliament met, we've released the final budget outcome for the year just finished, Mr Speaker, and that showed the first back-to-back surpluses in almost 2 decades. And this is a very important demonstration of our responsible economic management, and responsible economic management is a defining feature of the Albanese Labor government. We've been here for 2 years and we've delivered 2 surpluses. In the first year, a $22 billion surplus, which was a $100 billion turnaround from what we inherited from those opposite. In our second year, a $15.8 billion surplus, which was a $72 billion turnaround from what we inherited from those opposite. Now, that $172 billion turnaround in just 2 years is the biggest ever nominal improvement in a parliamentary term, Mr Speaker. And the second surplus is bigger than anticipated at budget time because spending is lower, not because revenue was higher than expected. Now, Mr Speaker, it's important to say that we do not see a surplus as an end in itself. We see the surplus as a way to fight inflation, to make room for our cost of living help, to buffer this country against global economic uncertainty and to pay down Liberal debt so that we pay less interest on that debt. And by paying down $150 billion of their debt, we're saving around $80 billion in interest over the next decade. Now, those opposite promised a surplus in their first year and every year thereafter, and they delivered exactly none, Mr Speaker. They printed the mugs, but they never printed a surplus, Mr Speaker. And we've gone back in black back to back, Mr Speaker. We've gone back in black back to back by deliberately banking revenue and methodically finding the savings. We've turned their 2 huge Liberal deficits into 2 substantial Labor surpluses. We've done this while providing cost of living relief, not instead of providing cost of living relief to people who need it, because we know people are doing it tough. Mr Speaker, that's what responsible economic management looks like. It would be unrecognisable to those opposite, and that's why they don't ask me any questions about it.
Call to the honourable member for Ryan.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Environment Minister. Emissions are higher under your government than the previous Morrison government. Yesterday, you told the Global Nature Positive Summit—
No, the member for Ryan will begin her question again. Everyone knows my position during question time. It's about the individual being respected and heard with their question. So no interjections while the member for Ryan begins her question again.
Thank you, Speaker. It's to the Environment Minister. Emissions are higher under your government than the previous Morrison government. Yesterday, you told the Global Nature Positive Summit that you want to protect nature and the climate. Why, then, do you keep approving new coal and gas projects, including one that will operate until 2080?
Call to the Minister for the Environment and the Minister for Water.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. And I might leave a little bit of time for the Climate and Energy Minister to add to my answer. But as I would say to the Greens political party, that the projects that she's referring to, the 3 extensions that she's referring to, every one of them is measured against our safeguard mechanism. That's a mechanism that you helped design, that you voted for, that will get Australia to net zero by 2050. You agreed to those laws because you said these will get carbon pollution down. I know that the Greens are a bit embarrassed about their history in this area because, of course, last time we were in government, they voted with the Liberals and Nationals to block action on carbon pollution reduction, and because of that, 80 million extra tonnes of carbon pollution was admitted into our atmosphere. Under Labor, by contrast, we've now got renewable energy proceeding apace. I have already approved I've approved 63 renewable energy projects, enough to power 7 million Australian homes. We've got renewable energy in our grid up to 42%, and on a very happy half hour last week it was at 72% renewable energy in our grid. What is the biggest risk to this transition to renewable energy? Well, the biggest risk is those opposite and their fanciful approach to suggest that nuclear power, the most expensive form of electricity generation, might help out in 20 years' time. And what absolutely blows me away is I never hear anything from the Greens political party actually pointing out that nuclear power is the biggest risk to the transition to renewable energy in this country. I'd remind the chamber that I'm the first minister in Australian history ever to actually block a coal mine, but I did that because of its impact on water and the Great Barrier Reef. Coal projects aren't assessed for their emissions under environment laws. They're assessed under the safeguard mechanism which you helped design and deliver and voted for. Do you want to add anything?
The Minister for Climate Change. Minister for Climate
Emissions.
Change.
Mr Speaker, I'm pleased to report to the House in support of the Minister for the Environment that emissions are down in the year to March 2024 by 2.7 million tonnes, Mr Speaker. That's what real policy achieves, not rowing around Newcastle Harbour. That doesn't bring emissions down. Real policies bring emissions down.
Call order. Give the call to the member for Macquarie.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. How is the Albanese government's actions to strengthen Medicare making it easier for Australians to see a bulk billing doctor after a decade of cuts and neglect?
Great question. Call to the Minister for Health and Aged Care.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for her question and for joining us this morning at the terrific Mental Health Expo in Mural Hall that Mental Health Australia convened, along with the member for North Sydney, a number of members across the chamber. When we came to government, Mr Speaker, bulk billing was in freefall, as the member said, after a decade of cuts and neglect to Medicare, and the member promised that a Labor government would turn that around. And we're delivering on that promise, Mr Speaker. The Treasurer just talked about the two surpluses he delivered. At the same time, he delivered the two biggest increases to the Medicare rebate in 30 years, Mr Speaker, in two budgets, increasing the Medicare rebate by more than those opposite managed in 9 budgets, Mr Speaker. And we tripled the bulk billing incentive for visits to the GP. Not only has that stopped the slide in bulk billing that we inherited from those opposite, Mr Speaker, it's also seen a rebound in bulk billing in every single state and territory. In less than 12 months, we've seen almost 5 million additional free visits to the GP, Mr Speaker. Yesterday's Health of the Nation report, delivered by the College of GPs, found that 1 in 4 GPs are bulk billing now more than they were last year, Mr Speaker. And the chair of the college's rural faculty, Dr Michael Clement, said the bulk billing changes did shift the dial from one of despair to one of hope, Mr Speaker. And I know, as the member for Macquarie knows, that these measures are making a real difference. They're making a real difference. But we also know that it's still tough to access doctors when people need it, and we need to do more to keep strengthening Medicare, and we will do more, Mr Speaker. But I'm also aware that I'm not the only member of this House who's been out and about recently talking about bulk billing, Mr Speaker. I also noticed that the Leader of the Opposition in the seat of Lindsay recently was trumpeting his proud record as a health minister. He said, "When I was health minister, we put a record amount of money into health. When I was health minister, the bulk billing rate was much higher than what it is today," he said, Mr Speaker. Well, let's remember, Mr Speaker, this is the same health minister who said, and I quote, there were too many free Medicare services, who then tried to abolish bulk billing altogether, and when he couldn't do that, imposed a 6-year freeze to the Medicare rebate that started the slide in bulk billing that we inherited, Mr Speaker. And as for more money, this is also the health minister who tried to cut $50 billion from our hard-working public hospitals, who tried to jack up the price of scripts by up to $5 a script, and who tried to make parents pay to get their child vaccinated, Mr Speaker. No wonder the Australian doctors voted this man the worst health minister in the history of Medicare.
Call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I ask further questions to be placed on the notice paper.
Order. Members on my left.
Are you about to get one where you go?
The Treasurer. The House comes to order. Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. Today, in a very short period of time, I will be heading to Laos to attend meetings of ASEAN and the East Asia Summit. While there, I will be meeting with Chinese Premier Li, building on the patient, deliberate and calibrated work that this government has done to stabilise the relationship with China. There will also be bilateral meetings, including with Prime Minister Trudeau of Canada, Prime Minister Luxon of New Zealand, Prime Minister Chin of Vietnam, President Yoon of the Republic of Korea, as well as meeting for the first time with new Prime Ministers, Prime Minister Ishiba, and I congratulate him on his election as the Prime Minister of Japan. That is a critical relationship, and I rang him and had a good conversation with him initially. The relationship with Japan not just is an economic one, but increasingly one that's important for our national security cooperation as well. As well, I'll be meeting the new Prime Minister of Thailand, Prime Minister Shinawatra, as well as having other meetings with leaders from our region. Mr Speaker, the nations of Southeast Asia combined will represent the fourth largest economy in the world by 2040. Southeast Asia is Australia's second largest two-way trading partner. 500,000 jobs in Australia are linked directly to trade with Southeast Asia, and it is home, of course, to a market that is 10 times bigger than Australia's. Southeast Asia is where Australia's economic destiny lies, and yet less than 4% of Australia's international investment goes to Southeast Asia. One of the meetings that will be held on Friday morning, led by Nicholas Moore, the former head of Macquarie Bank, who has done an extraordinary job as our special envoy for Southeast Asia, producing the Southeast Asia Economic Strategy to 2040, that outlines the opportunities that are here in Australia for Australian business with businesses in each of the ASEAN nations, following on from the successful summit and business meetings that we hosted in Melbourne in March. This will be an important event and will be attended by other businesses as well. The important hosting of another event that Prime Minister Ishiba of Japan is hosting is about how our economies move towards net zero together, and the cooperation that the Japanese Prime Minister is interested in developing in hydrogen and other areas that we have discussed, and I look forward to the importance of that. National security in our region is obviously critical. We remain concerned about the events in the South China Sea, and I'm sure that when I discuss with the President of the Philippines, who of course we hosted Bongbong Marcos here in the Parliament earlier this year, that is increasingly an important relationship for us. I thank all the DFAT people who've assisted with this visit, and I note that Nicholas Moore is someone who is a very successful businessman. He is not remunerated. He's not doing this out of any personal interest. He's contributing back to Australia, and Australia that's been good to him. And it's a great example of philanthropy, if you like, through his human capital being produced, that he's engaged. He's been there. He visited every single country in ASEAN. He's been there in advance of the visit, organising Friday's forum, and I think it is a great example of someone from the private sector making a contribution to public life, and I thank him for it, and I look forward to a successful summit being hosted over the next 2 days.
On indulgence, the Leader of the Opposition.
Well, thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Well, first, we wish the Prime Minister safe travels to a very important gathering of countries and leaders with whom we share a common interest and a desire to see the best for our region. I echo the comments in relation to Nicholas Moore, with whom we worked very closely on matters relating to PNG when we were in government, and he did an exceptional job for his country, and, as you say, Prime Minister, giving back to a country that has given him so much. But the strategic relationships, the trade, all of the issues raised by the Prime Minister are very important as part of those discussions, and we wish him well in his trip in our country's name. And perhaps on the sidelines, Prime Minister, you'll take the opportunity to trumpet the government's world-leading NBN program. Well done.
The Minister for Industry and Science has also indicated he is seeking indulgence, and he has been granted it.
I seek indulgence just to make a quick statement, if I may, Speaker. Last night we celebrated 25 years of the Prime Minister's Prizes for Science. We recognise that science matters. We recognise it helps us lead healthier lives, helps us understand the origins of life itself, preserving and protecting our precious environment, improving the way we get things done. And last night we got to properly recognise how Australian scientists lead the world. We've got many of last night's winners here in the gallery, and if I may, I'd just like to acknowledge them and their remarkable work. Thank you very much. Briefly, Speaker, astrophysicist Professor Matthew Bales took out the top prize. His world-first discovery on fast, short radio burst is helping unlock humanity's understanding of matter in the universe. Professor Andrew Wilkes and Dr Chris Burns, they shared the Prime Minister's prize for innovation for inventing, then commercialising a new drug for treating myelofibrosis, a rare form of blood cancer. The Frank Fenner Prize for Life Scientist of the Year went to Professor Britta Regli von Ungern-Sternberg, whose pioneering work is reducing the risks for children needing anaesthesia in surgeries. RMIT Distinguished Professor Tianyi Ma was recognised as the Malcolm McIntosh Physical Scientist of the Year for his groundbreaking work on renewable energy. The prize for new innovators went to Dr Andrew Horsley, the co-founder of Quantum Brilliance, who's developing groundbreaking quantum technologies, particularly using synthetic diamonds in quantum microscopes. Mr Speaker, every one of these winners has one thing in common: a teacher who sparked and nurtured their curiosity. That's why I was proud the Prime Minister announced last night that the prizes for teaching have been elevated to exactly the same level as our prizes for top scientists. And briefly, Daniel Edwards from Mantello Primary School in Burnie, in Tasmania, he took the Prime Minister's Prize for Excellence in Primary School Teaching. He's coached a range of teams from the school to excellent results in not only national but international science competitions. And Alice Leung in Concord High School in Sydney, she took the Prime Minister's Prize for Excellence in Science Teaching in Secondary Schools, a self-professed tech nerd who uses social media to inspire and interact with current and former students. She's nurtured students from a huge range of backgrounds into careers in STEM over her 16-year career. Well done to you. And I'm also pleased to inform the House Speaker we've announced that from next year there'll be a new category in the prizes recognising the contribution of First Nations knowledge systems. For 65,000 years, our First Nations people have been developing unique knowledge through their connection with land, sky and water, and we hope, by including this new category, a new generation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander scientists will be inspired to follow in their footsteps. Can I just say again, the people that were recognised last night and over 25 years have made an incredible contribution to improving the quality of life in this nation. They have done so, great moments of doubt, wondering whether or not their ideas would come to fruition. We are deeply grateful that they never gave up, that they continued to be determined in pursuing their ideas, because their success has enabled our own and helped our quality of life immeasurably. Thank you for your work.
We'll just go to the Prime Minister and then the manager. That's on further indulgence.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I join with the Minister in congratulating all the winners of the Prime Minister's prizes for science in the function that was held last night in the Great Hall. I must say it's one of the best occasions that you get to be as Prime Minister to give due credit to the extraordinary capacity of Australian scientists and these remarkable individuals who are nominated, but also the winners of these prizes, including the prizes where we have upped the reward for teachers, both primary school and secondary school. It's not about the money, it's about sending that message that it's valued. And I do want to also add, in addition to my congratulations of all the winners and all those who participated last night. It's very daunting, I've got to say, to be in the Great Hall with these extraordinarily intelligent Australians and politicians. It's just daunting to hear what they are able to achieve. And I do want to pay tribute, as well as I did last night, to Dr Cathy Foley, our Chief Scientist, who has done a remarkable job. Her term will finish at the end of this year. One of the best things I do as Prime Minister is the regular meetings of the Roundtable that I chair, and that I've attended every single one of those meetings because at every single one of those meetings I learn a lot, and the engagement and the knowledge that I receive about what Australia's scientists are doing is indeed worthy of applause and worthy of support of everyone in this parliament, but more importantly as well, everyone in this country.
The Manager of Opposition Business on indulgence.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On behalf of the Coalition, can I join in extending congratulations to all of the winners at the Prime Minister's Prize for Science last night. As the Prime Minister and the Minister have rightly said, these awards have been running for 25 years, strong bipartisan support under Prime Ministers from both major political parties, and I have no doubt that a future Prime Minister Dutton will similarly be strongly supported to and committed to science. Can I congratulate Professor Matthew Bales, Professor Andrew Wilkes, Dr Chris Burns, Professor von Unger Sternberg, Professor Tianyu Ma, the science teaching recipients Daniel Edwards and Alice Young, and can I particularly call out Dr Andrew Horsley of Quantum Brilliance, and so how great it is to see an Australian quantum company getting recognised.
And on indulgence?
Just have a question for you, if that's okay.
Sure.
The Prime Minister quit or ended question time in less than an hour. I was wondering whether you could advise the House when was the last time that occurred, and is this setting a precedent of question times to come or not? Because I cannot remember in my time here of question time being less than an hour. Thank you.
Thank the member for Wannon. And we shall move to papers. I call the Leader of the House.
Speaker, these documents are tabled in accordance with the list circulated to the honourable members earlier today. Full details of the documents will be recorded in the votes and proceedings.